a time to get fucking sober, right? I have a sobriety date, which is August 14th, 2016. So thanks to you guys and my higher power, which is a dope ass motherfucker, I just celebrated 4 years of sobriety. Awesome. Kate, thank you for having me out. Kate is by far my favorite crackhead I've ever met in my life. And that being said, I knew many. And that being said, my drug of choice was not alcohol, and that kept me out of these rooms for a number of years until I was actually ready to surrender. I got to my bottom by the way of opiates. They are my drug of choice. They are my homie. They were once my solution. Now you guys are my solution. I have a sponsor. I have a home group, which I kind of go to, maybe turn my camera on. I try my best to be of service, you know, checking those boxes daily so I can stay here. So I'm going to share a little bit of what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. I grew up a pretty anxious kid. I was very outgoing. I did not really have a big problem connecting with other people or making friends or anything of that nature. But I had this committee in my head that maybe some of you guys can relate to. And that committee in my head started telling me at a very young age that I was worthless, useless, that I would amount to nothing, right? And I had these other things, these ways in which I identified that society told me weren't okay. I looked at men and women the same way, right? I was a person of color who was born and raised in West Virginia, so I really stood out in that way. And, you know, there was a lot of trauma in which I went through as a child. I am a child of an alcoholic, one who has not found the path in which we have found. So there was a lot of physical, mental, sexual abuse in my story. And although I still to this day want that to be the reason that I'm an alcoholic, it is not. The reason I'm an alcoholic is because once I stopped, I can't stay stopped. And if I tell myself I'm just going to have one, that's never the case, right? And that what, I can't drink like normal people. I was just in a meeting right before this, a meeting that I go to on Monday nights, DCYP. It's the DC Young People meeting here in DC. And a newcomer raised their hand to share, and they were like, I really don't get how you guys can like be happy if you don't drink. Like, I don't get it. Can someone explain that? And it's just like, it's so true, right? I don't know about you guys, but I came into these rooms and I thought you guys were liars. Like, to stand in that nice podium or the big comfy chair in the front of the room and have the audacity to lie and manipulate all of us, right? That's what I really believed. And the reason is because that's what I grew up around. I grew up around a lot of lying and a lot of manipulation. So by the time I was 12, I can lie, manipulate my way into or out of anything. And I was a pretty troubled kid, I did well in academics. I did well in sports. So my first addiction was definitely fantasy. Like, that's the first addiction, if I go back, that I can really see. My second addiction became food. And then my third addiction became sports. So those, if I go far back, I can see my alcoholism way before I picked up a drink, right? And I started playing and experimenting with drugs in high school. I didn't really care for it. I really wanted to focus on the sports and the academics to get me out of my hometown, because I worked really, really hard on not becoming the product of my environment, and really, like, I beat them. Like, I just really surpassed them to the fullest. So I became an entrepreneur freshman year of high school. I realized that there were a lot of drunks and there were a lot of drug addicts, and I wasn't one of them. So I was going to make money off of you guys. And I made the fake IDs, and I sold the dime bags, and I was very, very proud of that, and it's that addictive behavior was always there. Those defects were always there for me. I felt at a very early age that I was very entitled to things. And one of the things that I was entitled to was money. And that's not something that I came from, right? And the first time that I took a drink, like many people say, I really, really needed it. And I needed it because, like I had mentioned earlier, that committee in my head that told me I wasn't good enough, that committee in my head that told me I needed to, sell the drugs, or that committee in my head that told me that I needed to go to that party, right? And the committee in my head that told me like I should have done better, you know, and the committee in my head that said, you know, being attracted to women isn't okay. The committee in my head that told me being a person of color was never going to be accepted. And the list goes on and on and on. And when I took that drink, you know, a lot of people just explain that like that relief, like they finally just, but for me, I was like, yes, like I could finally like hear the party that I was at, right? Like the committee in my head was just, it was just little chatter. Like they didn't have control of me anymore, right? So I knew that if I could just make it through, you know, Monday through Thursday, maybe Thursday night, I can make my way into a dive bar. I started going into dive bars about my junior year of high school, those nasty ass places with the sticky floors, right? But you could get a pitcher of beer for about a penny, right? And my addiction at first was just like, it was so cheap. You know, I came in here and I used to hear it was for fun and for free. And I was like, nothing in life is for fun and for free, right? Because my addiction at one point costed a penny. And by the end of it costed about $40 for something so small that disappeared so quickly, right? I did not believe that anything in life was for fun and for free. So, you know, in high school, I got in a little bit of trouble, but I was still doing pretty well with sports and academics. And I actually got several basketball scholarships. And I figured that was going to be my way out, right? And looking back on my addiction, where I can see my alcoholism actually started taking control of my life was my senior year. My senior year of high school, I'd sit down with my guidance counselors. Throughout my childhood, I had a lot of people that were my parents that weren't ever my parents, like teachers who believed in me, my guidance counselor, my basketball coach, so forth and so on, right? They were never people that were consistently in my life. They were there for 2 or 3 years, right? So it was like every 2 or 3 years, I would just start living this new life, you know, and it's, you know, in the rooms, they talk about just peeling back the layers of the onion. It was like I had been living like this facade for many, many years. And by the time I got here, I was an expert at it. Sorry, I got a text. So I'm sitting there with my guidance counselor. I had several offer letters, and I told her, I actually can't really go to any of these schools because I have siblings and I need to. Did my internet go out? I'm sorry. I was in so much fear because I had finally had all the drug dealers and I had finally had my way into all the bars and I could drink and use the way that I wanted to. And I wasn't about to go off to this new town and build this rapport with all the doormen that I had worked on building my entire high school career. So I ended up staying home, and I'm from Morgantown, West Virginia. That is a college town. The people there drink the way that I like to drink. I did not have any difficult time finding my people. My people were there. But what happened for me was I went there on a promised scholarship, a full ride, and by my second semester, I was on academic probation. And I was unwilling to take a look at my drinking. My drinking and my drugging was not the problem. I was really unwilling to take a look at that. And I was like, I've been playing sports my entire life. I just need to play sports again. So I ended up walking on and playing a college. I became a college athlete. And to really like, for me, like my drinking doesn't really look any differently than yours as, you know, in undergrad. I ended up in a lot of police cars, but I was taken home. I was never disciplined. It was my hometown. I was a star athlete growing up there. All the officers knew me. Most of them I was related to, and I just was not disciplined. And when I went to treatment in 2013 was my first time going into treatment. And what happened for me was I went from a college athlete to a college dropout to completely dependent of opiates within a matter of 3 years, right? And just looking back, like, I mean, drugs and alcohol, my addiction took over my life so quickly. And I went to treatment the first time, and I had a lot of reservations with alcohol. I did not believe that I was an alcoholic. I just believed that I had, you know, issues with the substance that I could not get off of myself. So I ended up going to treatment, and as a result fault of the way that I was living, I could not go home because I was facing indictment charges. So I ended up coming back. I ended up coming to Washington, D.C., where my father lived. And the treatment facility told my dad that they suggested I do like a 90 and 90 or whatever that BS was at the time that treatment suggest. So what I did was I started going to all these meetings. But like I said at the beginning, I really didn't believe anything that you guys had to say. I thought it was all lies. I did not believe that you guys could live this life of serenity, the peace. I did not believe that the smiles were real. I thought like this whole basket thing was like robbery. Like, how dare you pass a basket in front of me and ask me for $2? Like, who do you think I am? Like, I came in here very, very, very entitled and felt like my way was the only way and that you guys were lying and you just, you couldn't lie to me. And that led me to a double life for about 3 years. And I actually hid in this meeting every Wednesday from 2013 until about 2015. I lived in an Oxford house. We had our weekly meeting. I was dating somebody in the rooms at the time, and I felt like if I just date somebody who was sober, like I would live, I'd be okay, right? And then I'd come to this meeting. I met Scout at a Icky Paw back in 2016. They told me about this meeting, and I came to this meeting and I hid in here, and it was my only connection with AA because I refused to go to any in-person meeting, and I was dying inside. And it was all because I did not think that I was an alcoholic. And within those 3 years, like I may make it like 3 months or 6 months sober, and then I'd be on the next megabus back to West Virginia getting drunk, and then I'd come back to DC and I'd go to the meetings and I'd drink the coffee and I'd eat the cookies and I'd date anybody willing to, date me, right? Just because I need that. Human beings were the only higher power that I knew my entire life. And I did not believe that that would change when I came in here. And, a part of Kate's story that I can really relate to is I came into these rooms and I saw the capital P and I was like, you guys aren't tricking me, man. I know you're referring to God. God doesn't like Black. God doesn't like queer. I'm not a woman. I'm not a man. I'm not this. I'm not that. Like, you can't fit me in your damn bubbles. And this whole God thing isn't going to work. Like, and it didn't help that we were meeting in the basement of churches, right? Like, I really thought this was a really religious program. And, so I went back out drinking and drugging for 3 years, and I came back into Alcoholics Anonymous crawling in here, just completely broken. I was hopeless. I had no idea what I could do next, right? And what I did was what you guys suggested, which is get a sponsor, get a home group, start working the steps. And my life really started to change by doing that. But what happened to me is I got to the third step and I couldn't get past the third step. And I couldn't get past the third step because I had the audacity to come back in here in 2016 and tell you guys that I was dry the entire time, but I was still sober. And that was eating at me. And that was really keeping me from a higher power that I know today to be a loving higher power for my queerness and my Blackness and my extraness and everything about me. My higher power absolutely loves me, right? And I came back in here and I got honest with my first sponsor and we worked through the steps. And I really like to talk about Form 5 because my that's what kept me out of these rooms the first 3 years that I was here. And I'd get to my fourth step and I'd predict that my sponsor was going to relapse. So I'd switch my sponsor, and then I'd predict that that sponsor was going to relapse, and then I'd switch. But this time I really stuck it out with this sponsor. And I remember doing my first fifth step and leaving her house. She lives out in the country. And I just rolled down my windows and I started banging some like Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears and NSYNC, and just letting my like inner child just vibe out. Like, I felt so damn free actually sharing all these secrets that I thought that I would take to the grave. And then I reached a bottom in my sobriety. Like, I wasn't in the middle of AA, right? I had a sponsor by name. I was working with people, but if they didn't call, they didn't call. I didn't give two shits, right? I got the good paying job You know, I started getting what I thought to be the promises of AA. And I was going to the meetings and I'd have the service position, but, you know, I was not practicing these principles at all. And it was killing me. And I had to make a switch in sponsorship. And that takes me to like my second real fifth step. And it was terrible. It was by far the most, it was very, very, very dark. There were times that I considered that I may need to go to the psych ward. But what I can see today and what I'm very grateful for is I finally saw that last column. I'd finally been willing and open to seeing my part in life, you know, several decades of creating harm, right? And the best way that I describe it is I'm like an extension cord, and I go and I plug myself into everybody's life being the outlet, and I suck out all the damn energy that it has. And then I unplug myself and I go to the next person, and it's just use and abuse, right? But what AA has helped me to see is there's a better part of me. You know, there's a better part of me who loves, who gives rather than takes, right? And then AA introduces me to people like Kate, who see the good in me when I can't see the good in myself, and they give me a chance, and they tell me they love me, and they tell me they want to work with me, and they invite me to their house, right? I wasn't invited to anybody's house unless they were trying to cop and I had something that they wanted, right? I'm invited into the lives of you guys because I actually have something that you guys find to be attractive, right? Rather it be my honesty or the authentic being that I have become today, right? And that is all a result of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know, the past 6 months have been pretty hard for me, as I imagine they've been for the other 95 people in this room, right? But Alcoholics Anonymous has really been on the front of everything that I do, right? You guys teach me to call people, to ask for help, right? You help me to take my inventory so tomorrow I can try my best to be a better version of myself. And that is one of the best gifts that I have today. I'm not trying to be like anybody in this room, right? I came into Alcoholics Anonymous and I heard people say, I didn't fit in at the party, so I drank to feel better and to fit in. That wasn't my story. I don't think there's anything wrong when that is your story, but I stole your story, and I was unwilling to see that I wasn't okay with who I was, right? Whether, like, I drank because the committee in my head told me that my sexual identity, my gender identity, my relationship style were all fucked, right? But I came in back into this room and I learned self-awareness. And well, I have today self-awareness, I have self-love, and all of those things that used to not be okay with me are, and they connect me with other people in this room. And for that, I am forever grateful. Kate, thank you for having me come out tonight. And I'm grateful to be in this meeting and to have my video on. Because like I said, I hid in the back of this meeting for several years. And that I'm grateful for, because this group was my connection to Alcoholics Anonymous for many years when I was unwilling to get off of my ass and to walk into an in-person meeting and admit that I'd relapsed, you know. So if you're lying about your sobriety today, I just ask you, get honest. Like, just get honest. You know, we won't be the first, we won't be the last to relapse, and we won't be the first or the last to lie about our sobriety dates. You know, we do it, like we do that. So anyways, thanks for letting me share.